It's a big one, but it's not a maxi. All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
The A1200 or Mini Vectrex. We separate fact from fiction on the growing excitement and speculation.
Bad news for IBM and Apple. The Commodore 128 revisited.
Never mind your Commodore. The real deal is 30 years old. Windows 95.
And exciting Ultimate news, along with updates for fans of the CD32 and Nintendo 64 coming up on this week's show for the week of Saturday, the 30th of August, 2025.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Jason,
Hello,
you're not having a good day, are you?
Yeah, it was a rough weekend here in up-to-date tech as my main computer blew about 48 hours ago, and I'm waiting for my Mac Mini M4 replacement to replace my 2018 edition. But for now, thank you, Duncan, for whatever you've made this look like, because I'm currently running on a Chromebook that's got a bunch of stuff jammed into ports and making it very uncomfortable.
I'm impressed that's working.
Me too.
I suspect people might have missed the drop at the end of last week's show from you, Chris. What did you tell us at the end that you kept a secret the whole show?
I dropped that it was very towards the end that I had in fact backed the Spectrum Next after convincing that Duncan, Dave, and Jason that I had not in fact backed the Spectrum Next after complaining that I'd missed out. And, well, interesting update on that this week, because as I'd said before, I was really excited about the initial Spectrum Next, the first Kickstarter, but I didn't jump on board because I hadn't even heard of Kickstarter before that. But one of the videos, looking back, that convinced me that this would be a fantastic product to own, and this is before I'd rebought a Spectrum Plus 3, was from Retro Recipes. So, basically, the CEO of Commodore is the one that convinced me to back the Spectrum Next.
Yeah.
So there you go.
And someone was impressed. This comment really made me smile on last week's show. From Stephen Elliott, after the end where you did really get us. We are talking Jape of the decade. We're talking April, May, June, July, and August full, which I always love a red dwarf quote. So that made my day seeing that. Thank you very much, Stephen Elliott.
And hey, can I talk a little bit about the subreddit now that I know how the show works?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it occurred to me, like, we really haven't talked at the top of the show, just how exactly does the show work? We talk about it being powered by community news. But yeah, I wanted to just take a sec to talk about how the This Week in Retro subreddit works. That's at reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. If you've made it this far and you're not sure exactly how the show works, that's fine, because I only learned when I had to take this chair. The most important thing, we want to get these things straight because we don't have a team of accountants that like add up the votes for us. So if we just kind of get the ground rules in place, it'll go a lot smoother for everybody.
Yeah, and when you are posting something, have a quick scroll, a search first. If someone's already posted it, give their post an update, an upvote, and an insightful comment in support rather than posting the same thing again if you can.
That'd be cool. And when you do post, please be sure that either the title or the body text, ideally both, make it clear why it's important and timely.
And something I've learned for the past few months of being a moderator on Reddit is that Reddit hates two different types of links. One type of link it hates are URL shorteners like bit.ly and stuff like that. And it hates lots of links. So try to post just the one link to the most important, main landing page for whatever it is you're posting about. And if we do all these things, then we're going to get more input on the subreddit and hopefully a wider variety of voices, and your interests will be represented as well.
Yeah, but remember, all you need to do is listen to the show. You don't need to do all this if you don't want to. It's there for you if you want. Let's get right into it, folks. We have a packed show again this week.
My wife has, on occasion, asked me, when will it end? No, not my marriage. She's referring to my current, rather small, as I think it is, retro collection. I have uttered the words, "This is the last Amiga I'm buying," when purchasing my CDTV. And of course, I recently popped my Kickstarter cherry for the Spectrum Next. I am legitimately trying to target my collecting on stuff I used to own and not straying too far from that. I certainly don't need any more minis, that's for sure. Have I mentioned the fact that actually the first console I ever played on was a Vectrex?
Doesn't ring a bell.
Doesn't ring a bell. Well, it may or may not be relevant today. Anyway, enough about my collecting and what I shouldn't be buying. News from Gamescom 2025 then. Thanks firstly to 42Nobody42, who shares with us the exciting news that there's a new Kickstarter about to launch. There are working prototypes that were spotted at Gamescom, and yes, it's a mini, and it's a Vectrex. It's about half the size of the original, using a high-res AMOLED display. Is that the right way to say that? It is now. So it's not true vector, and I don't think anyone would expect it to be. And I'm going to be so bold as to say, with modern displays, high-res, small screen, it doesn't need to be. It apparently also has HDMI out, so you can connect it to a larger display. It seems to have a neat little USB chargeable wireless controller, looking much like the original, and it appears to even feature the overlays that gave the original monochrome display its in-game colors. And an SD card slot for, well, you know what to do with that. Tempted, guys? Dave?
Well, I don't think I will be. The Vectrex, for people who don't know, the Vectrex was a console which had a vector CRT display rather than the normal CRT display. And a vector one meant it drew lines that had this supernatural glow to them that made the vector displays something really special that you don't see anymore. My favourite is the Star Wars arcade one, but there's also Battlezone, there's Black Widow, there's Tempest, there's all sorts of things that look absolutely unique and amazing. And the Vectrex console, although it was mono, but you could get colour with these things, and there is a complicated way to get colour we covered many years ago. That's the key thing about the Vectrex is the display, and I'm not yet convinced that the emulation would do it justice. If I was convinced, I'd buy it, but with doubt, I won't. I have experimented myself with vector emulation on a screen, and it can look pretty decent. It doesn't look quite the same, but it looks pretty decent. I should also point out and thank regular listener Happy Coding ZX, because he helped me with that. He got me set up with how to do it initially, which has now been integrated into MAME. And if you get the settings right, you can get it to kind of glow like vectors do. And it's much better for things like Star Wars. And I'm sure that a high-resolution AMOLED would be better yet, but especially when they tweak and tweak and tweak it to get the settings just right. But until it's just as good as, I don't think I would want to.
And the other thing about that vector screen is it was portrait mode. So if you haven't seen the machine itself is kind of unassuming, but it's this weird squat little desktop console that if you haven't seen one, or didn't realize what you were looking at, once you know what it is, like, oh, that's what that thing is. That was kind of my experience because I never saw them in the wild as a kid, but I just wasn't in the vein where they were being sold apparently. But I'm potentially interested. I mean, yeah, to Dave's point, you can wish all you want for something that simulates the vector graphics, well enough, but a dedicated recreation, if they've really managed to nail the settings for that particular one model of screen or whatever, I'm going to keep my eyes open.
Games Radar also covered this news, actually, in a piece called After 42 Years, Someone Has Finally Worked Out a Way to Make a Mini Version of My Favourite 80s Console by Phil Hayton. And I couldn't let that go unanswered, as I know full well that YouTuber Retro Game On, aka Brendan, who lives not too far from my house right here in Perth, WA, in fact, I've had drinks with the guy, well, he put in the hard yards and made one from scratch 3 years ago. So I'll put a link to his video in the show notes as well. Do check that one out. Anyway, to avoid speculation on the new, but 3 years later, mini Vectrex, as seen at Gamescom 2025, follow Vectrex.com. And talking of speculation, the other big news for us old folks, yes, the big news for us old folks from the event was Retro Games Limited and their stand. This featured the new Black C64 Mini and a massive banner featuring a very nice-looking render of the new full-sized machine with the Settlers 2 logo right beneath that. That full-size machine is TheA1200, all one word. They did not call any of their products a maxi, and in fact had to take to Facebook to say the following, quote, Full news October, but some answers. Yes, it has a full-size working keyboard. We have not released any internal tech specs yet to anyone, nor will we be included in terms of hardware accessories or software, apart from the one amazing title included. It's just one of multiple full-size and mini releases over 2025, 2026 and beyond. And it's not called a Maxi. Nothing we have done is called that. They are either full-size with working keyboards, or if they have no working keyboard and are half-size, have the word mini after the model name. So this one is called the A1200.
We could use a word to distinguish between the minis and the full-size ones with working keyboards. Can I suggest we use the word Maxi?
No, they said no.
No. And this week in Formula E news again, I think that nothing good comes of the nickname Maxi. There's a driver, Maximilian Gunter, who the commentator used to call him Maxi Gunter all the time, and apparently he like privately said, "Could you please knock that off?" And so somewhat chastened, the commentator was like, "I've been asked not to call him that anymore." So yeah, well done, Retro Games Limited, for taking a stand against this insidious nickname.
Nearly 50 years ago, when my parents picked me up from the hospital, I'm adopted, when they picked me up from the hospital, their car died. What car was that? A Maxi.
My dad had a Maxi. Austin Maxi? Oh, yeah. I got fond memories of the Austin. Anyway, back to the story. Don't get me started on Austin Maxi. That post by Retro Games Limited was actually in response to the article by Time Extension, shared with us by Osprey Shower, which has now been edited because it originally stated, quote, "Images from the show floor have already confirmed it is the A1200 Mini, the full-size Amiga replica that the company has been trying to release for years," end quote. Now, that sentence clearly doesn't make sense, so anyone reading the context would work out that the word mini was a typo. Sure enough, it's now been corrected to read, "Images from the show floor have already confirmed it is the A1200, the full-size Amiga replica," etc., etc. So Time Extension have listened, they've removed the typo of mini and have not replaced it with Maxi as per Retro Games Limited's wishes. Retro Games Limited clearly states that it is a full-size machine with working keyboard, and they've been saying that for ages. The render we've now seen looks stunning. It looks like a stunning A1200 with the Retro Games Limited style A1200 badge in small on the left-hand side, and exactly what I asked for, the slanted serif embossed font screaming A1200 on the right in place of the word Amiga, and the correct original looking keycaps colors as well. And center stage at Gamescom on their stand in a glass case was an all white full-size machine, which looks to me like it's just a prototype shell. In fact, there are some excellent photos and video of it at amigang.com. I'll put a link in the notes. And at the time of recording this, these are the cleanest, most revealing images of that case prototype that I've seen emerging out of Gamescom. And possibly the best written, most balanced take on it as well. Despite Retro Games Limited's clarity, the rest of the internet was instantly confused, and it would seem, ignoring their own eyes, their perception of size, and Retro Games Limited's very own posts, an entire video, in fact, and I'm not going to shame the channel, but someone made an entire video stating hand on heart as gospel fact that the machine would in fact be a mini.
I'm going to shame the channel because I think what he's done is foul. He's had it explained to him in the comments by lots of people, including yourself, Chris, that he was wrong. So he's made this video where he goes on about it being miniature in size. He realizes he's wrong. So rather than take down the video or pin a comment or change the title or whatever, he disables comments so that people can't call him out, which continues to get people misinformed just so he can keep getting views. It's selfish. It's irresponsible. It's a channel called Just Jamie, and he's titled it, "For anyone wanting the latest news for the upcoming A1200 by Retro Games Limited, this is the video to watch. Details and more here." Yeah, no, mate. Don't watch that video. It's rubbish, and the guy should be ashamed of himself. Anyone can make a mistake, but to realize you've made it and try and cover it up in order to get views is bad, especially for a channel that in retro terms is not small, 42,000 subscribers and over 4,000 views on that video so far. take the video down, and stop being a...
All that aside, Retro Games, they've also stated that TheA1200 will come preloaded with the Settlers 2. That's fantastic. We covered that game last week, and it hints at the emulated power of the system. But again, simply because there was also a real A1200 at the show playing Settlers 2, and despite it clearly saying Amiga on it and clearly being yellowed with age, it seems people were confusing this with the Retro Games product. And now bold statements like, it's definitely using FPGA, have emerged on social media. As far as I'm aware, there was no working prototype at the show, none. So to be hitting up your socials with such statements is keen, but you're probably wrong. So follow Retro Games Limited for the actual facts. Again, link in the show notes. Even we make mistakes. That's why we have Housekeeping. I think we're a rare outlet that actually puts our hands up and says, whoops, and makes the corrections. Even if it takes us a week, obviously, but we do them. I suspect it will not be a FPGA. It will probably be based on an updated version of what was in the A500 Mini. But that's me now speculating, so I myself will follow Retro Games Limited for the facts, who promise more details in October. I actually don't care which it is, so long as it's affordable. And it's not the only way to Amiga these days. So for myself, despite having 4 real Amigas, I'll happily use Amiga Forever or Winyo EE. I've got an Amiga A500 Mini. And I don't think this show has even touched on the amazing stuff out at the moment by Amiga Kit in the forms of the A600 GS and the A1200 NG, which is an emulation board that fits in an A1200 case with a mixture of both modern and original ports. It's actually quite stunning. So again, follow Amiga Kit for the facts on those. So guys, let's break into discussion, I think. It's about time. Enough of me. If your real Amigas fried their internals tomorrow while trying to run Settlers 2 or Outrun, would you get one of these or any of the alternatives? Jason?
I think the A1200 might actually be the first RGL product that I'm sufficiently motivated to own. Like I've enjoyed using the ones that I've come across, but it's never been the right combination of price and want for me. But I almost always get frustrated at some step or other of setting up Amiga emulation or configuring the in-universe stuff in the emulated Amiga. These guys historically have done a really great job at making carousels and sideload mechanisms just work. So that might actually grab me on this one. I just wanted to throw in there, like, I have no idea why in the world people would think that RGL would switch to FPGAs now. The ARMs that they use are only getting cheaper and faster, and Settlers 2 aside, Amiga workloads haven't gotten that much harder as the years have gone by. Like, there's no reason for that. I mean, I'm happy to be corrected when things come out, but that is fantasy booking right there. I'd never heard of those 600 GS or 1200 NGs either. Interesting projects, but not really for me.
I've got more than one Amiga here, and I live to some actual, real, bona fide Amiga geniuses. If I can't fix it myself, I've got Terrible Fire. I have Rob Cranley, and that's only the start of it. There's loads more people. So I really, really like my A1200 that I put into a black Checkmate case. I really particularly like it. I wouldn't want to lose it. I would fix it. I would do something. I'd put an FPGA board in it if it came down to it. But that doesn't mean I don't like this Not Mini, Not Maxi. I'm going to call it a Maxi. It's a Maxi.
It's not a Maxi.
Just don't do it.
You can't stop me.
They'll give us a takedown.
Stop me.
No, we can't. But now that RGL's entered the chat, like, oh my God.
What are they going to come at my house and beat me up?
They're going to tell you to stop being a and take the video down, Dave.
Yeah, there you go. Interpol intervention. Who knows?
It is. I think these are absolutely fantastic products. They are cheap for what they are. They do a great job. The emulation in all of these devices, the Ataris, the Commodore 64s, the VIC-20s, the Amigas, the emulation is incredibly mature. It is so stable. It's great emulation. There's no reason to think that the emulation isn't up to the task. It is. The carousel works great. You can start off, you can buy it, plug it into your TV and go just like that. Within a minute, you're going. And you can add games later if you want to. They're a great way to get into it. And if you're not sure if you want it, you can watch the price go down and down and down and play a little gamble where You buy them when they get cheap, or they go out of stock and you have to pay a fortune to get them secondhand. But they make improvements with each iteration of it. So I think they're fantastic things. So I'm sure lots of people will go get lots of enjoyment from them. As to what's in it, of course they're not going to go FPGA. I'd be absolutely stunned if they went FPGA. Why would they? It's going to be a system and a chip thing like what they've done before. Why would they take that diversion? If they were taking that diversion from that, surely they would say something about it. But we'll find out in a couple of months when they announce the official specs on it.
That's it. Well, as said, just before I bought my CDTV, I said to Nikki that I was only going to buy one more Amiga. And anybody that knows Commodore history knows that the CDTV was never called an Amiga. So I do, in fact, want the TheA1200, and I will get one. I'll probably be giving my A500 Mini away when I get it, though, to one of my mates, because I don't see the point in owning both. Will it have link up? Okay, this is a question nobody asked. Will it have link up? Because as far as I'm aware, that's not been done before, and that would be really cool. So I'm excited, as I love the ease of point of entry with these products that Retro Games Limited put out, and that's the point of them. Given the expected early 2026, people are anticipating. My only question now is, if the Spectrum Next doesn't, in fact, ship in time for Christmas, then which one of these devices will I be playing on first?
Will it be the Commodore 64 Ultimate?
No.
We are sponsored this week, thank you very much, by Sega Mania Magazine. Sega Mania Magazine are a fan-made magazine who go to incredible lengths to give you a proper Sega experience as if you were back in the day. Sega Mania issue 9 is available for pre-order from sega-mania.com following their second successful Kickstarter. So congratulations to them for getting that far. If you want in on it, go and pre-order it on their website. Make sure you get in on it.
Issue 9 sees them covering the first half of 1996, which is when the Saturn started picking up a little bit of steam. They're also still giving the Mega Drive plenty of coverage, as even in 1996, it was still giving the world some great games.
And that new issue 9 releases in September, October 2025. They do have both print and digital editions. They themselves consider the print edition far superior. It's a full-color 84-page proper magazine presentation. You can actually hold it in your hand.
Yeah, holding it in your hand is really important for magazines. When Tim has spoken about this, he's told me about the vision that he had for this magazine, and it's so much effort they've gone to make it actually happen, and to be able to physically hold it in your hand and look through something that could have come from the 90s is amazing. Printed copies will be extremely limited in numbers, so you will have to pre-order now or potentially miss out forever. And there are another highly limited number of back issues available on the website, which was sega-mania.com. Thank you very much for sponsoring us this week.
From the Better Late Than Never file, Weeping Scorpion 1982 reminds us that the 40th anniversary of the Commodore 128 flew by without much discussion on our show. His reminder got a lot of discussion on our subreddit, reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro, so let's dive into the details. The Commodore 128 came out in 1985. It was a direct evolution of the Commodore 64 architecture that launched in late 1982. And it was clearly intended to be a more businessy way to use the Commodore 64 platform. The title of this story comes from an early 2-page ad for the machine, signaling its targets, those two leading microcomputer platforms for business use. An article on Tom's Hardware from earlier this year attempts to put the 128's launch into historical perspective. For example, having two independent display outputs, that was unusual for a home computer, especially at the price point. And the modestly improved specs over the 64's sounded great on paper. Had a 6510 compatible CPU capable of 2 MHz instead of 1. 128K RAM on board instead of just 64. The integrated Microsoft Basic version 7.0, far more powerful and convenient than the C64 equivalent. Dave.
The two displays, there's a port of Eye of the Beholder, which is a fantastic dungeon crawler. There's a port of Eye of the Beholder to the Commodore 128, and it uses both displays at the same time, which is phenomenal. It's finally given the C128 a purpose.
And you just said something that we'll come back to in a minute. So put a pin in Dave's remarks there, and it's not about Eye of the Beholder. The 128 came in two form factors. There's a standalone unit, which goes on to inspire things like the look of the Commodore 64C, the Amiga 500, and of course later the 1200. And then there's also the Commodore 128D. That's a desktop build. It's got a detachable keyboard, integrated floppy drive in the main computer unit. The keyboard, by the way, in either iteration, much more professional than the 64's, has a numeric keypad, more function keys across the top. It does look businessy in a way that the original 64 definitely did not. A big selling point of the 128 was that it was three computers in one, driven by two distinct and incompatible CPUs. The MOS 8502 CPU handled both the new native Commodore 128 mode with its 128K RAM enhanced BASIC. Now, the machine could also be booted straight to Commodore 64 mode, or you could switch into it, in which everything looks and feels the same, and 99.99% of the software out there works the way that you'd want it to, but you've got a more modern-style keyboard than the old Breadman driving it. But wait, there's more. There's a Z80 chip also on board, which, with a boot disk, turns the machine into a slow but serviceable CP/M computer. CP/M, being the disk operating system that occupied the space MS-DOS had come to dominate by this time, but it still had a deep library of mostly productivity software built up and ready to go. But CP/M star was falling clearly long before the 128 came out, and even the appearance of a bunch of new computers capable of running CP/M didn't really change its prospects. So I know that the Commodore 128 had a bigger footprint overall in North America, but just to be sure, Chris, Dave, did your life ever put you on a trajectory where you're like, what I really need is a Commodore 64, but with some mildly extra stuff included, with better BASIC and somewhat more RAM, and also with a Z80 CP/M mode that's kind of awkwardly and ineffectively bolted on?
I don't remember ever seeing or knowing of the C128 or the Commodore.
Really?
Yeah, no, not at all. No, it wasn't on my radar at all back then.
No, I'd never heard of it until in recent times and when it was retro.
Okay.
Never heard of it.
But Dave, you called it the 128, and I do want to have a brief discussion here about the British convention. We both, on both sides of the Atlantic, we call the 64 the 64, but we call the 128 the 128, and consistently you guys call it the 128. How and why did this happen?
Whatever it is, we're right and Americans are wrong about it. It's a Z80. It's a 1-2. I don't know. It's just the way it's happened. I mean, neither way is right. Is our way slightly shorter, perhaps? 128, 128. Nah.
Yes, yes, it is. Yes, it is.
You save a syllable. You save a syllable, but I don't think you. I don't think you gain clarity. Now, in fairness, we're not saying 128. I bet they do that in Quebec. But reach out in the comments and let us know. Now, to be clear, the Commodore 128 did have a lot of fans. I didn't personally have one until they were available for cheap in the mid-90s, but I absolutely coveted one as soon as I read about them. That extra CP/M library sounded really cool in the write-ups on the machine and Computes Gazette that I read every month. And it always seemed like someday there would be really killer apps that took advantage of the 128's unique capabilities and dual displays. There were a few titles out there before Eye of the Beholder came around, but yeah, it's been in modern times that people have started to imagine, well, what could you do? And keeping in mind that a lot of the capabilities of the machine weren't actually changed from the Commodore 64. That VIC-2 chip, that's the same thing that's found in the Commodore 64. There's the second graphics chip, the VDC, that provides an 80-column color text mode with basic character graphics capabilities. So overall, software support for the Commodore 128 mode itself was mixed. As far as games go, Infocom, as they often did in this time, they bought in. They released some Commodore 128 specific titles, but they also bought in on the Commodore Plus 4 for that matter, along with most of the other machines, that had disk drives that sold to the public in that era. There were a decent number of productivity titles that would take advantage either of the extra RAM or the 80-column mode or both. One issue with the design of this machine was that you couldn't actually use that full 2 megahertz speed unless you were in an 80-column mode. You could use some extra speed in the space that the video wasn't actually being drawn, and you could even do that in Commodore 64 mode, which some titles have taken advantage of over the years, like a fan hack of Elite that runs in 64 mode but can use 128 speed boosts. Hardware support in the marketplace in the time was somewhat better. There were Commodore 128 specific fast loading carts. There were various utility ROMs that would take advantage of a special internal socket. And of course, most of the devices for the Commodore 64 for joysticks and user ports like modems, those work just fine in the 128 mode. Now, for a machine that sold anywhere between, depending on which sources you like, nearly 2 million units to maybe twice that estimate on the high end, you'd think there would have been more enthusiasm for it in the market then and now. But aside from those added capabilities not being all that much better, still the same VIC-2 chip, 16 colors, 8 sprites, same 3-voice SID concept, and the price being about twice as much as you would pay for a regular C64, I do think there's another reason to sum up why this three-headed monster just didn't light the world on fire. There's an old saying, if you're explaining, you're losing. And as odd as that sounds when applied to inherently complicated high technology, they've got a point. Like the Apple iPhone, it cut through a lot of confusion on early smartphones by boiling its interface down to a single button. You're not sure what button to press. Well, it's the one button. If you wanted to ship Commodore 128 software, you needed to explain which mode it needed to run in. Does it run in Commodore 64 mode? 128 40 column, 128 80 column, CPM, you're explaining. And by the way, there's a key, a clicky key, like a caps lock key, old style caps lock key on the keyboard that tells the computer whether you want to be in 40 column or 80 column mode when you boot up your 128. But if that's in the opposite position as your monitor, you might think that your computer's dead because the other screen is going to be blank. Once you learn how the machine works, you're not going to be frightened by this. But when you bring it home, you could be. Dave.
Just listening to you talk about it here, this makes me think it's one of those technological inventions that someone should have said, okay, stop, just abandon this. This is a terrible idea. But they've continued with it for one reason, whether it's sunk cost or whatever, they've continued with it. But what you're describing there just doesn't sound like a winner.
So, and if you read articles in other, in generalist publications or other, other departments, Atari and other areas, a lot of engineers in the early 80s were fascinated with the concept of, I can design a bus that we can put 2 CPUs on, and I'm going to do it. I don't remember offhand, but there's some antic podcast interviews with Atari engineers that were just beating their brains out trying to do this sort of thing. And the 128 team was just beating their brains out. We can make this work. We can make this work. This is what the world needs. And I think to your point, Dave, the agony and the ecstasy of Steve Jobs, the way that Mike Daisy frames it is that Steve Jobs was good at being there to knife the baby. Like, no, we're not doing this. But a lot of other companies that did not have that.
Jack would have knifed it.
We'll have how responsible is Jack for the terrible +4 discussion another time. That's a sidebar. I think you made some bad calls.
The 128 came after Jack. Jack was chased out of the doors of Commodore.
No, he was long gone. But we'll delve into his legacy another time. But yeah, in any case, the 128, complexity begets more complexity, and it's easy to see. People were impressed by the 128 specs. They were willing to pay a little more to get something that had more capabilities. People are willing to up their ceiling price if they see, well, I might use this down the line. But it's also just as easy to see why a lot of vendors just couldn't sustain momentum selling into a market that had over 1 million machines, but many of those just ended up spending all or most of their time running in 64 mode, running stuff made for the computer that was less robust, but also more likely to just work when you wanted it to. And meanwhile, if you are a person in 1985, 86 who's got money to spend on a true next generation experience, well, the first wave of Macintoshes was out. I mean, it's way more than you'd pay for a 128, but you could do it. You can, by this point, get a 286 powered IBM PC AT or clone. That starts to look like something. The Atari ST and the Amiga, they're both waiting in the wings. Once you do get the GEOS graphical operating system for the 128, it is a pretty powerful beast for productivity, but by then, the 16-bit machines are earning their keep. So as fond as I am of the 128, there is a real case to be made that Commodore, back in that day, absolutely wasted every penny that they did not spend on one of 3 major buckets of investment. 1, cost-reducing the C64 within an inch of its life. Something I acknowledge they did a lot, but I assert they could have done even more. 2, supporting whatever it was they wanted their next generation machine to be. That's obviously the Amiga once they buy that machine. Or 3, becoming a better vendor of DOS clones. Again, if that's what they want to be, fine, do that thing. Spend your money there. Don't spend it here. Did you guys have any favorites from that 8-bit era where you started to get to that upper end of the tech curve? You know, things like the 128, the Spectrum Plus 3, CPC. I don't know. Do you call it the 6128? How many digits do we spell this out? You know, those things where it's the second or third iteration of that 8-bit concept.
The first micro that I owned was a 6128 in America or a 6128 in the UK. 6128. I don't know how to call anything else. 6128. It's
the 6128.
It has CPM. It has 80 columns. It has 128 kilobytes of memory. It has a built-in disk drive, so it's a C128 except much better. It was fairly high-end for the UK at the time. It was fully compatible with the 464, which also had 80 column mode. And it was fairly high-end because everyone in the UK used tapes. Almost everyone, unless they had liberated a BBC from their local school, like one of my friends had. His dad was a headmaster. So for some reason, they had a BBC Micro school computer with disk drives in his house all of the time. I do like the 128D, though. I don't have one. I have at times been tempted to buy one because I love that form factor. I love a separate keyboard, the pizza box style case for it, the kind of the thin desktop case, which is why I've got a Mega STE, which is that form factor, which is why my Amiga 1200 is in a Checkmate case for that form factor. But I'm going to stick with what I've got, which is a Commodore 1701 monitor on top of a Fellows riser stand with a 1641 disk drive under that, and a C64 ready to go, which is not the case because I've got a C64 that I have to solder up from scratch or wait on the C64U if I'm going to be lazy. That's coming from Perifractics Commodore. But that's what my final Commodore setup will be. I don't, other than Eye of the Beholder, I don't have a reason for the C128. It's a cool machine, but I don't have a reason for an upgraded C64 because nothing that I would do in a C64 would really justify it other than maybe Elite.
And Chris, you made the Chris is smelling something stinky face at the very beginning of this story, so...
Did I?
You did. I don't know if it's going to make it the end.
Completely unconscious. Simply because I like I said, I had no knowledge of the C128. My favorite 8-bit machine back then was the Spectrum, lusting after the 48K. But then some of my mates, do you know what? The Spectrum 128 Plus completely missed me. I don't recall seeing that in shops at all or reading about it or anything. The toast rack. But as soon as the Plus 2 came out, well, that's when I became aware that this thing had 128K. And for me, I wasn't into the specky details back then. So new sound chip, all of that was completely, above my head. It was, well, this thing has more memory, therefore it must be better. And that's how it went. And the other big pull for the Plus 2, which of course, let's be honest, was an Amstrad, but the built-in tape drive, because as Davis said, in the UK, we predominantly loaded games off tape. Only the rich kids had discs. And it was a real pain a lot of the time getting a good signal from your external tape deck into the audio jack of your Spectrum and balancing all those unknowns to actually get the perfect balance of Zen to be able to load a game from tape. But the Plus 2, it just worked because it was an internal tape deck. So that was a massive upgrade. So that would be the first sort of upgraded 8-bit that I remember lusting after. And so that's why it was quite interesting when I got my Plus 3 for my birthday in the year that I did, 87, because at that time I didn't even know it existed. So I was hoping for a Plus 2, and this magical thing was unwrapped, actually bought for me by my brother John, who Dave's met. And I'll never forget that because literally, and I that's never been repeated. It was a machine that, yes, I wanted, but I didn't know I wanted it because I didn't know it existed. It's fantastic.
So as it turned out, a lot of very cool and useful computers came out in 1985. Commodore 128 did not set the world alight with its feature set, but they are still going strong 40 years later. So happy birthday, you Commodore Cerberus.
So I want to welcome 2 new patrons. So I want to welcome Uncle Ron and I want to welcome Nick. Thank you very much for becoming official twirlers. If you'd like to join them, if you'd like to become a patron, then where would you go, Jason?
You'd go to patreon.com/thisweekinretro. Joining now gives you access to all of the exclusive content that's been up there over the years. including our 4-part Q&A series that we just wrapped up with some photos of our game shelves. And I can honestly say we're going to start talking about what we're going to do for some exclusive Patreon posts coming up in the Northern Hemisphere autumn, let's say.
Yeah. Do you still call it autumn? What do you call it, Chris? Do you call winter winter?
It's because it's winter.
Right.
We don't, but spring and autumn, I say, don't exist. It just goes straight from summer to winter.
Fair enough.
And back again. Yeah.
So first off, an update on the new periphractic Commodore. Part 3 of his video series is out. It's a bit longer than the others, and it goes into a bit more detail. It shows the signing of the contracts, some really quite interesting stuff about the manufacturing. And the whole thing is a feeling of a bit of a victory lap for him, which, to be fair, I think is deserved at this point because they have succeeded in everything that they tried to do so far. They have acquired Commodore. They've launched the C64U. It seems to be going okay. The next step, though, the future of the Commodore is where I'm not quite convinced yet. They're hinging it on this digital detox brand, and I'm not sure if any of the three of us have really an idea of what that will actually look like, although I'm open to your thoughts on it.
Yeah, look, my thoughts on new Commodore at this point after watching part 3 is I think we were wise to be cautious on our coverage, but I actually think all the heads involved seem to be more screwed on than some people thought. I think that's the way I'm going to word it. And I, for one, I think I'm moving from apprehensive to optimistic. And at the end of the day, look, Christian has dared to dream a dream, and maybe his dreams have actually come true. In terms of where the product line goes, well, for me, as far as I'm concerned now, it's just another company. It's Commodore. Atari produced stuff. Some stuff that of theirs I buy, some stuff I don't. And so it's going to be the same with Commodore. They exist again. Great. Let's see what they bring out.
As far as being better adjusted, I mean, I do believe there's less talk of parallel universes in part 3, so that's a thing. Last time I talked about this, I did draw a parallel between professional wrestling creative leaders and periphractic, and I got some pushback in the comments, but I'm going to double down on this because in part 3, he revealed something that we've been discussing at This Week in Retro internal, which is how much of this was actually all predetermined in advance and then turned into this 2-part entertainment series. And he, in fact, comes out and says, this was all predetermined, and I did a 2-part entertainment series. But now I'm giving you the truth. Now you're seeing things play out in real time. And that is the classic 21st century wrestling booking. Now that kayfabe is dead, there's a lot of this, well, what you saw last week was scripted, but this week, this is the real stuff.
Well, we'll see what comes. The digital detox thing, not so convinced on, but I'm delighted that he's been able to bring 3 projects together. C64 crowdfunded thing, I mustn't say Kickstarter, to me seems to be great. So that's what I'm happy with. But we'll see what happens, and we will cover it here when there's something to talk about. On to news and briefs, and there is an excellent DOS reference site, loads and loads of information on it. A brilliant thing to bookmark and to keep, thanks to G7VFY for linking us to Vernon Brooks' site, pcdosretro.gitlab.io.
And as we said a few months back, Ultima is coming to the VIC-20. Well, it's finally here, but it's not Ultima 3 this time, it's Ultima 1. So thanks to G7VFY for that one as well.
Yeah, now he's done the entire original trilogy, and he did say next up Ultima 4, so we will see where that goes. Another news, Analog have delayed their N64 console remake again, according to Engadget. Thanks to Sheppo71 for that.
Another Commodore Mini, because apparently there's not enough of them going on. This is the Mini CD32. It's not an official Commodore. It's an unofficial Commodore. It will apparently boot CD32 discs as well as ADF files from USB. So thanks to Optimus Dizzy for that.
Well, that's a relief.
I'm not buying another Amiga. We also have a BBC link from the archives, and it's 1967, and someone has a home computer. So thanks, Dr. Local. I've watched some of that, and when the guy's typing on this console, it sounds like a World War II machine gun going off. It's hilarious. You got to watch that.
Yeah. And the American got BBC Micro News, so hang on with me. Finally, this week, if you've always wanted a BBC Micro-themed set of keycaps, you can pre-order them now from Signature Plastics, even including an F0 key. Zero?
Yeah.
F0 key.
Zero.
All right.
That's where numbers start.
Just it could be an FO, it could be a faux, it could be,
an FO key. Is that when you get annoyed at the computer? FO.
It even includes an F0 key, and thank you to IllExam 8054 for that news.
The Romans didn't have zero.
Loads more. It's not a Roman keyboard. Loads more on the subreddit if you're looking to spend some time, browse through some stuff, kill some time at work, skive, have a look at the Reddit, which is, Chris?
Reddit.com/r/this week in retro. You caught me out because I was just thinking Commodore should release a new computer that's digitally unplugged and it has Roman numerals instead of numbers. Brilliant. There's your detox.
On the 24th of August, 1995, Microsoft, who Commodore fans at the time considered to be their mortal enemy, but I imagine Microsoft were saying at the time, the Amiga died last year. What are you talking about? They launched the biggest operating system launch ever, the most hype ever, the most successful. Could it be any more of a massive launch? Well, no, because for some strange reason, Windows 95 was kind of sort of cool at the time. Everybody was into it. Most people were into it. Everybody, apart from one or two. Jason. Or at least that's what Microsoft wanted. Spending $300 million on marketing alone, which is roughly the figure that Commodore lost in their last financial report before bankruptcy. It sold 7 million copies in the first few weeks and went on to sell 40 million in its first year alone. Things moved much faster in the 90s, and as of course we all know, it was succeeded by Windows 98 a little less than 3 years later, and Windows 95 had itself replaced Windows 3.1, which came out in 1992. So that 3-year period kept repeating. Windows XP came out roughly 3 years after Windows 98. And in fact, if you go back to Windows 1 onwards, it was roughly 3 years between Windows 1 and 2.0 and 3.0 and 3.1, then 95, then 98, and then XP. And please nobody correct me by pointing out ME and NT, etc. But those were the big releases. The point is, though, that things have slowed right down. We're talking about upgrading to Windows 11 or not, and that came out 4 years ago. Lots of people are still happily using Windows 10, which was 2015. Now, for the hype on this, the Rolling Stones. Half of the cast of Friends, I think. Half of them? 2 of them anyway. Jay Leno, Brian Eno, Weezer. It even turned Bill Gates into a celebrity, a household name. But what did Windows 95 actually bring to the table? Well, the big deal was the taskbar and the start menu, 2 things that we take for granted now and exist on most desktop operating systems, either directly or in equivalence. Although I think they were certainly riffing on what came out for Arthur, the Archimedes operating system back in 1987. And the start menu, you can argue, maybe came from Unix. But in both cases, the taskbar and the start menu were significant steps forward. And the inclusion into Windows 95 cemented them, at least until to the current day. The operating system, for the first time, tried to install an infinite combination of hardware automatically. PCs, of course, being whatever you wanted to configure them to be. And that, of course, meant, as it tried to do this, lots of crashes. But for the most part, it was good at it. For gaming, though, the big thing, and for some reason, when I've looked at what people say about Windows 95, people don't seem to pick up on this. But the big thing with gaming for Windows 95 was Microsoft's DirectX. Originally called Windows Game SDK, and then changed to DirectX in 1996. It was a collection of APIs that allowed games to have a robust middleman to act as a bridge to the hardware. DirectX is still, of course, used as the main thing in Windows for games, but it's also used in equivalence in a PlayStation, GNM, and a Nintendo have their NVN. And if you're in Linux, for example, or a Steam Deck, you'll be using Vulkan. All of them are the interpretation of DirectX, which came in Windows 95. But for me, though, it's the first operating system that I booted into and stayed into for normal use. Windows 3 was for productivity, so you went in, you did what you wanted, then you can back out. But once I got Windows 95, I booted into Windows 95, and I stayed there. I launched games from it. I played MUDs on it. I went online. So that was the one that stuck with me. And I'm still using Windows 11 now, and it is really just progressives from Windows 95. Now, Chris, I know that you were a convert when it came out. Can you remember the hype?
Do you know what? I don't remember the hype, and it would have been 96 when I got Windows 95, and simply because it came on the Pentium 100 that I bought. And thinking about it, I worked for an IT company in London at the time, and our clients were still on DOS/Windows 3.1, right? Or predominantly. And we were just starting to roll out, like Exchange servers and stuff like that. But so buying this machine with Windows 95 on it, I felt like I was more ahead of the business world, the clients we were still serving, if we haven't managed to upsell them. So, I mean, it was very different. Like you say, you tended to just boot into it and stay in it, but it was sort of that sort of confusing middle period of, DOS games, and some games weren't happy and trying to figure out dual boot and that kind of stuff. I do remember Duke Nukem, is obviously a DOS game, but you could make it work from a desktop shortcut. That was possible. There was all that messing around, but I think in that period, if something didn't work, then I was more inclined to just let it be in the past, not play that game, and move forward with the all-encompassing Windows 95. The Weezer, I mean, you mentioned Weezer briefly. You can't talk about Windows 95 without mentioning the Weezer video by Buddy Holly. And it wasn't just that you got this full music video on the disk, on the install disk, but you were watching video on a computer. And at that point, that wasn't normal. That felt like a massive leap. So, yeah, that's my memories of Windows 95.
It was normal if you had an Amiga.
Yeah, Jason. That's true. I mean, they've been doing it since 85, sorry. Yeah, true.
I know, I don't know, Jason, if you were dual wielding Amiga OS along with Windows. Maybe on one hand, you were playing games and doing productive stuff on Windows 95, and on the other, you were using Genlock to put station logos on TV broadcasts and make the pilot for Babylon 5. What did you make of the launch hype for Windows 95?
All right. Now, I think if we're going to do the ad hominem attacks on American Amiga users, we got to customize this, because the television director Richard Compton directed the Babylon 5 pilot and several episodes. So if you're going to go Babylon 5 on me, you got to start to go, but you and your uncle Richard Compton were discussing, so let's, next
Is
time.
that your uncle?
No, it's not, but you got the last name tie-in. You get the last name tie-in, so just keep hammering on that.
I can edit this. Is that your uncle?
No.
No, okay. No lying from Jason. You could have got away with that. Nobody would ever really pick you up on that.
But hammer those, so I can go, no, it's not him. We can add to that. No, I mean, at the time, I had the reaction every diehard Amiga fan in the 90s had to attention paid to a more popular and successful computing platform. I had blind, unreasonable rage. I mean, I gotta say, it's interesting, the rose-colored lenses that we put on everything, because Dave, you remember Windows 95 and even 98, like, this device driver stopped working. I'm going to remove it, tell it to refresh everything. So the other thing I remember, apart from the blind, unreasonable rage, is I remember finding it just odd that any operating system was getting this much hype and publicity. And as you said, they spent a lot of money on this. But I think it may have been the first instance in my life of something that I've become increasingly sensitive and aware of. I find it weird and not entirely pleasant just how mainstream and niche nerd culture has become. Like, I would totally embrace computer geeks like us getting all weird about an impending OS drop, but why is this on the evening news? And that's just kind of mounted. It's also very odd for me to sit here and remember a time when I was all in on Fear and Loathing of Microsoft, when they now seem oddly benign and have for a very long time. But yeah, I did not at all like the hype around the first edition of Windows 95. I was pleased when those initial releases were unstable messes, but I readily acknowledge by the time you got to OSR2 in 1996, Windows 95 was plenty good and usable. And that also, not coincidentally, seems to be when things like OpenGL and DirectX started being included by default, making it more of the all singing, dancing, you can do your productivity, you can have your fun in here too.
Yeah, the crash is really down to the brave decision they made to try and say, right, we will configure all the hardware in your system, no matter what it is. And of course, that was such an ambitious thing that it failed so badly at times for people. You had people who just couldn't install Windows 95. They tried and rebooted and tried and tried. I think for the most part, though, it was okay. But thanks to Squelch 411 for making sure we didn't miss this super important anniversary by linking the Tech Radar article, which I made sure I didn't read until after I'd written my notes because I didn't want to accidentally plagiarize the entire thing. So the author, Lance Ulanoff, which I think is a great name, Lance Ulanoff talks about his experiences on the day in 1995 in Redmond, Washington, which is where it was born, if you like. And he's even got a picture of his ticket. It's definitely worth a read of that experience there. What a wild thing to think about an operating system launch having so much hype. The only hype that I can think of is the iPhone. That had a bit of hype about it. And then the new Commodore. And that's it.
The big three.
On now to question of the week. And last week we asked you, what tech invention are you glad that we no longer have to use? So if we go to the subreddit, I take us out of contest mode, we can see what the top answer is. The top answer is from Southern Grass 416, and I agree with this, I didn't think about it last week, ball mice. Some of them were okay, but most just got clogged up with crud and were horrible to use. And something I've noticed when you go back to using the old mouse is just sweeping it across the desk. The modern mouse that I use almost stays exactly the same position. It's a world of difference.
Yeah, we had a lot of great answers to this one. Jimmy Quick gives the answer, modems, just a world of slow phone line hogging pain. You can add fax machines, too, to the list of evil telecoms devices.
And my screen appears to be showing things in different order, so I'm just going to go with the one that I've got at the top, which is OK Promotion 3226 says pulse dialing. It took me forever to dial in a different country to call your relatives that were working in Austria or Germany. Also, sound quality was like on an AM radio.
Paul, a.k.a. Hermsky, says manual car chokes. If you got it wrong, you'd be in trouble. So glad it's now automated by a computer. How did we cope?
Yeah, pretty much everything that deserved it, I think, got a whack here. Cassette tapes for storage. Pajaco mentions all those different power supplies that we used to struggle with before most things went to USB-C, which sort of is standardized now, kind of.
Yeah. Internet connections that only work when you weren't talking on the phone. CRTs, boo! Nah, I get that. Anything productive, you're better off not in a CRT. Pulse dialing, DVD disc resurfacing machines.
Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah, all sorts of stuff in there. Thank you very much.
Tuning the TV to find the signal for the games. No, that was fantastic. I missed that.
And for the question of the week for next week, where were you on Windows 95 release day in August 1995? Or to open up a bit, what are your memories of the hype at the launch of Windows 95? Were you an early adopter, or were you sitting furiously hating on it? Let us know on the subreddit. And thank you for joining us this week. We'll see you next week for, I'm sure, what will not be quite a long an episode. Surely not as much will happen next week. It just seems to be a cavalcade of news these days. But we'll see you next time. Goodbye, twirlers.
Bye, everybody.
I'm waving. Jason's waving. Chris is waving. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
This Week in Retro was written and presented by Chris from 005 AGIMA, Jason from the Retro Adventurers, and Dave. It was edited by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcast app, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/thisweekinretro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. Please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.